The scent of lilacs hung heavy in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of fear that coated my tongue. Spring had come early this year, but inside our stone manor, winter's chill still clung to the walls. My fingers trembled as I braided my pale blonde hair, watching my reflection grow increasingly blurry through tears I refused to shed. Tonight was the spring offering, the night when eligible daughters from noble families would be presented to the werewolf royalty. A tradition as old as the peace treaty between our kinds, humans and werewolves had coexisted for centuries in uneasy alliance, with marriages often sealing political arrangements. This year, the offering had a specific purpose. The Alpha King needed a bride. My stepsister Elise was supposed to be presented tonight. Beautiful, graceful Elise with her perfectly practiced curtsies and memorized royal protocols. But 3 days ago, she had collapsed with a raging fever that left her bedridden and delirious. My stepmother had paced the halls, muttering about promises to the council, debts that needed repaying, and consequences that would rain down upon our family if we failed to present a daughter. Eleanor? The door swung open without a knock, revealing my stepmother's rigid silhouette. In the 6 years since my father's death, I had never once heard warmth in her voice when she spoke my name. "Stand up straight. Let me see you." I rose from my vanity, smoothing down the silver gown that had been hastily altered to fit my frame. It had been intended for Elise, who was shorter and curvier. On me, the fabric hung awkwardly, making me appear even more angular and pale than usual. "You'll have to do," she said, circling me like a predator assessing wounded prey. "Remember what I told you. You are to accept whatever proposal comes your way. Your father left us with nothing but debts and a crumbling name. This is your chance to be useful." The small silver locket that had been my mother's, my only inheritance, seemed to grow heavier around my neck. I touched it reflexively, remembering my mother's words before she died. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in choosing your own chains. "But the Alpha King," I began, "is wealthy beyond measure and controls the largest territory in the region." She cut in sharply. "And he needs a human bride to maintain the alliance. Yes, he's paralyzed from that assassination attempt last year. Yes, he's said to be cruel and bitter now, but you will do your duty to this family." Her fingers dug into my shoulders. "You will save your stepsister from this fate. After all we've done for you, it's the least you can offer." What she meant was, after all we've tolerated you. The unwanted reminder of my father's first marriage, the plain, bookish girl who preferred the company of the kitchen staff to the nobility, who had no social graces worth mentioning. Unlike Elise, who had been groomed for a prestigious match since childhood. "The carriage leaves in 30 minutes, my stepmother said, already turning away. "Do not embarrass us." When the door closed, I sank back onto my stool, fighting the urge to flee into the forest beyond our estate. But where would I go? What would I do? At 18, with no money and no connections, my options were non-existent. And beneath my fear lurked something else. A desperate, childish hope that perhaps, somehow, I might find a place where I belonged. I had never seen the Alpha King. Few humans had since the attack that had left him confined to his chambers in the royal palace. Rumors swirled. He was hideously scarred. He was more beast than man now. He had killed servants who displeased him with a single blow. The only certainty was that at 32, he remained unmated, and the werewolf council was growing increasingly concerned about succession. As our carriage rolled through the darkening countryside toward the capital, I stared out the window at the passing trees, their new spring leaves silvered by moonlight. My stepmother sat opposite, lips moving silently as she rehearsed the proper protocols. Next to her sat my stepsister Nina, Elise's younger sister, only 14, and wide-eyed with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Remember," my stepmother hissed as the royal palace came into view, its towering stone walls and glowing windows both magnificent and terrifying. "You are representing Elise. Say as little as possible. Your looks are—" She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Unremarkable enough not to draw attention. With luck, one of the lower-ranking alphas might find you suitable as a political match. Just don't embarrass us." The palace courtyard teemed with carriages and finely dressed nobles, both human and werewolf. I could always tell the difference. Werewolves moved with a fluid grace that humans could never quite match, their eyes reflecting light in strange ways, their presence commanding instinctive deference. A stone-faced servant led us through vaulted corridors to a grand ballroom where dozens of young women in jewel-toned gowns stood with their families, nervously awaiting inspection. My stepmother pushed me forward to join them, then retreated with Nina to the section reserved for family members. I stood alone, feeling exposed and vulnerable. The silver gown, so hastily altered, gaped slightly at the back. I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on the intricate mosaic beneath my feet, rather than the evaluating gazes of werewolf nobility circling the room. "Chin up," whispered a girl beside me. "They can smell fear." Before I could respond, a hush fell over the gathering. The massive doors at the end of the ballroom swung open, and a procession of royal guards entered, their black and silver uniforms immaculate, their faces impassive. And then he appeared. The Alpha King didn't look like a man broken by tragedy. Seated in a wheeled chair of gleaming silver and black wood, he projected such raw power that every person in the room, human and werewolf alike, lowered their eyes instinctively. Except me. Something in me refused to look away, even as I felt the weight of impropriety in my direct gaze. He was beautiful in the way predators are beautiful, all sharp angles and lethal grace. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from marble, pale and perfect, save for a single scar that ran from his right temple down to his jaw. His shoulders were impossibly broad beneath his formal black attire, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair, strong and elegant, but it was his eyes that held me frozen. Eyes the color of Arctic ice, so cold they burned. Those eyes scanned the room slowly, dismissively, until they locked with mine. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Some primal part of me recognized the danger in that gaze, yet I remained transfixed, like a rabbit caught in a snare. His expression didn't change, but something flickered behind those frozen eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. The ceremony began, with each girl being formally presented. I barely heard the droning introductions. My awareness narrowed to the pressure of that glacial gaze that returned to me again and again throughout the proceedings. When my turn came, my stepmother stepped forward to announce me as Eleanor Blackwell, daughter of the House of Blackwell, conveniently omitting that I was merely a stepdaughter, standing in for her true daughter. I curtsied as I had been taught, wobbling slightly on unfamiliar heels. A ripple of barely suppressed laughter ran through the gathering, and heat rushed to my cheeks. But when I straightened, the Alpha King was still watching me, his head tilted slightly as if I were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The selection process was brutally efficient. After the presentations, royal advisors moved through the crowd, tapping certain girls on the shoulder and directing them to one side of the room. These were the ones deemed worthy of consideration. One by one, young women were led away, presumably to be introduced to various unmated alphas seeking brides. My stepmother's eyes blazed with disapproval as I remained untapped, standing awkwardly among the dwindling number of rejected candidates. Then, a tall, silver-haired advisor approached me. Unlike the others, he didn't tap my shoulder, but bowed, a gesture of respect typically reserved for those of high rank. "The Alpha King requests your presence," he said, his voice carrying enough to cause heads to turn throughout the ballroom. "Please follow me." Shocked whispers erupted around us. My stepmother's mouth fell open in astonishment, while Nina clutched her arm, wide-eyed. I felt dizzy, uncertain if this was fortune or catastrophe. Following the advisor on trembling legs, I was led not to a small antechamber like the other selected girls, but through a private door behind the royal dais. We walked in silence through corridors that grew increasingly quiet and opulent, until we reached a set of massive doors guarded by stern-faced wolves in human form. They nodded to the advisor and swung the doors open without a word. "Wait here," the advisor instructed, gesturing me inside. "He will join you shortly." The door closed behind me with the finality of a tomb being sealed. I stood alone in what appeared to be a private study, walls lined with books, a massive desk before a window that overlooked the palace gardens, the scent of leather and pine hanging in the air. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the rich carpets. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain any werewolf within a mile could hear it. Why had he singled me out? Was this some cruel joke to humiliate the girl who didn't belong? Or worse, had he somehow divined our deception? The door opened silently behind me, and I knew without turning that he had entered. The very air seemed to change, becoming charged with a strange electricity that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. "You may look at me," came his voice, deep and smooth as dark honey, yet with an edge that hinted at carefully controlled power. Most humans can't bear to do so. Yet you couldn't seem to look away. I turned slowly, finding him closer than I expected. In the intimate space of the study, the impact of his presence was even more overwhelming. Up close, I could see that his eyes weren't simply blue, but contained flecks of silver that seemed to glow in the firelight. "Tell me," he said, wheeling himself closer, "why the daughter of House Blackwell smells of kitchen soap and old books rather than expensive perfumes? Why does she stand like someone trying to disappear, rather than a noble daughter trained since birth in deportment? And why—" His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Does she wear a gown hastily altered to fit a frame it was never intended for?" My breath caught. He knew. Of course he knew. Werewolves had senses humans could only dream of possessing. "I'm not Elise," I whispered, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. "My stepsister fell ill. I was sent in her place. I'm Eleanor, the unwanted stepdaughter, the replacement." I waited for anger, for punishment. Instead, he laughed, a harsh, rusty sound, as if he hadn't used those muscles in a long time. Finally, someone who doesn't reek of lies and ambition. He moved closer still, close enough that I could see the individual threads of gold in his black jacket, could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Do you know what I am? Eleanor, the replacement?" "The Alpha King," I answered, my voice barely audible. "Alaric Grey," he corrected, "ruler of wolves and men, reduced to interviewing brainless debutantes because my council fears I'll die without an heir." His mouth twisted in bitter amusement. "And now, it seems, I've been sent damaged goods." The words stung more than they should have. I was accustomed to being dismissed, to being found wanting, but something in me, perhaps the same something that had kept my gaze steady when others looked away, rebelled against this dismissal. "I'm not damaged," I said, my chin lifting. "I'm just not what you expected." His eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of surprise on that controlled face. For a long moment, he simply studied me, as if trying to peer beneath my skin to the thoughts beneath. I fought the urge to fidget under that penetrating gaze. Finally, he smiled, a small, dangerous curve of lips that never reached his eyes. "No," he murmured. "You're not what anyone expected." He wheeled back slightly, creating distance between us. "Tell me, Eleanor the Unexpected, what would you do if I chose you as my bride? Would you run screaming from the monster in the chair?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't fully comprehend. The monster in the chair. Was that how he saw himself, this man who commanded fear and respect with a mere glance? I touched my mother's locket, drawing courage from its familiar weight. "I don't see a monster," I said softly. "Just a man who's been hurt." Something flickered in those ice-blue eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. He wheeled closer again, his movement fluid despite the chair. "You know nothing about me. I know you were attacked," I said. "I know you lost the use of your legs. I know people whisper that you've become cruel." I paused, gathering courage. "But I also know that rumors are rarely true." He studied me, head tilted slightly. "And what of your rumors, Eleanor? They say the First Lady Blackwell's daughter is odd, prefers books to people, spends more time with servants than nobility." His lips curved into that not-quite smile again. "They say she's plain and awkward and entirely unsuitable for marriage." Heat flooded my cheeks. Then perhaps we're well matched in our unsuitability. I regretted the words instantly. Had I just suggested that I, plain, unwanted Eleanor, could be a match for the Alpha King? But to my surprise, Alaric threw back his head and laughed. A genuine sound this time, rusty, but real. "You're either very brave or very foolish," he said, amusement lingering in his voice. "Most people wouldn't dare speak to me with such honesty." "Perhaps they should," I replied before I could stop myself. "Perhaps you need someone who sees you, not just your crown or your—" Chair. The amusement vanished from his face, replaced by an intensity that made me want to step back. But I held my ground as he moved closer, close enough that I could see the individual silver flecks in his blue irises, close enough that I caught his scent, pine and smoke and something wild that made my pulse quicken. "And do you see me, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Or do you see a convenient escape from your stepmother's house?" The question struck too close to truth as I'd been avoiding. Yes. Part of me saw opportunity in this bizarre twist of fate. A chance to escape a household where I'd never belonged. But there was something else too, a strange, inexplicable pull toward this man that defied rational explanation. "Both," I admitted, honesty compelling me where caution might have advised otherwise. "I won't pretend I'm not desperate to escape my stepmother, but I struggled to find words for the inexplicable connection I felt. I think there's more to you than what others see. Just as there's more to me." He leaned back in his chair, regarding me with an expression I couldn't read. "Interesting," he murmured, almost to himself. Then his tone shifted, becoming brisk and regal once more. "You may go. Tell no one of our conversation." Dismissed so abruptly, I could only curtsy awkwardly and turn to leave, confusion swirling through me. Had I failed some test? Said too much? As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. "Eleanor." I turned back, my hand on the ornate door handle. "The spring offering concludes tomorrow night with a formal announcement of matches," he said, his expression unreadable. "You would do well to prepare yourself for the possibility of change." With those cryptic words echoing in my mind, I was escorted back to the ballroom where my stepmother waited, her face a mask of barely contained curiosity and calculation. "What happened? What did he say to you?" she hissed, pulling me aside. "He asked about our family," I said, the partial truth easier than explaining the strange conversation we'd shared. "He made no promises." My stepmother's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, we mustn't get our hopes up. Come, we're returning to the manor. There are other alphas who may yet show interest." Throughout the carriage ride home, my stepmother cycled between dismissing the possibility of royal attention and plotting how to leverage it. Nina watched me with wide, curious eyes, as if I might suddenly transform into something magical, simply because the Alpha King had spoken to me. I remained silent, replaying every moment of my encounter with Alaric, trying to understand what had passed between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by my window, watching moonlight silver the landscape, feeling as though I balanced on the edge of a precipice. Everything could change tomorrow, or nothing would change at all, and I would remain trapped in this half-life, neither daughter nor servant, belonging nowhere. "What should I do, Mother?" I whispered, clutching my locket. No answer came, of course, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the distant howl of a wolf. Morning brought chaos to the manor. A royal messenger arrived before breakfast, delivering an ornate invitation addressed to me personally, requesting my presence at the palace immediately. My stepmother nearly fainted with shock, then sprang into action, ordering servants to prepare my finest clothes, which weren't fine at all. "We must have you looking presentable," she fretted, rifling through Elise's wardrobe. "Thank goodness you're both fair-haired, at least." Within an hour, I was dressed in Elise's second-best gown, a pale blue creation that had been hastily pinned to fit my taller frame, with my hair arranged in an elaborate style that made my head ache. My stepmother's instructions rang in my ears as the royal carriage bore me back to the palace. "Remember your manners. Speak only when spoken to. Do not mention Elise's illness. If he offers for you, accept immediately." The palace seemed different in daylight, no less intimidating, but alive with activity rather than shrouded in ceremonial solemnity. I was led not to the formal areas I'd seen the night before, but through corridors where servants bustled about their duties, casting curious glances my way. We arrived at a sunny chamber overlooking a private garden. Waiting inside was not the Alpha King, but an elegant older woman with silver-streaked dark hair and the same piercing blue eyes I'd stared into the previous night. "Lady Eleanor," she said, her voice cultured and cool. "I am Lady Sophia Grey, the King's mother. Please sit." I sank into a chair across from her, trying to maintain the posture my stepmother had drummed into me over breakfast. Lady Sophia observed me with a frankness that reminded me of her son, making no attempt to disguise her evaluation. "You're not what I expected," she said finally. "I hear that often, my lady," I replied, earning a slight raise of her eyebrows. "Yes, I imagine you do." She leaned forward slightly. "My son has expressed interest in you. This is unprecedented." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I remained silent, waiting. "Alaric has rejected every candidate presented to him since the attack," she continued. "He's made no secret of his disdain for the whole process. Yet here you are, a girl with no connections, no fortune, no particular beauty by conventional standards." Her gaze sharpened. "Why you?" The question didn't seem cruel, merely direct. I appreciated her honesty, even as it highlighted my own inadequacy. "I don't know," I admitted. "Perhaps because I don't want anything from him except understanding." Lady Sophia tilted her head, studying me as if I were a curious specimen. An unusual answer from an unusual girl. She tapped her fingers against the arm of her chair. "You know, of course, that he cannot sire children naturally, given his condition. Heirs would need to be conceived through magical intervention. The process is not always successful." Heat crept up my neck at the frank discussion of such intimate matters. "I hadn't considered that aspect," I said honestly. "No?" Her eyebrow arched skeptically. "Most girls dream of nothing else, becoming mother to the next alpha king." "I've never been most girls," I said. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Indeed." She rose gracefully, moving to a sideboard where she poured 2 cups of tea. "My son is not an easy man, Eleanor. Even before the attack, he was intense, demanding, often solitary. Now," she handed me a delicate porcelain cup, "now he carries wounds that go far deeper than his physical injuries." I accepted the tea, breathing in its fragrant steam. "You're warning me away from him. I'm preparing you," she corrected. "If he chooses you, and I believe he will, your life will never be your own again. You will be watched constantly, judged endlessly, and expected to navigate a court filled with wolves who will see your humanity as weakness." "And what do you see it as?" I asked. She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her severe features. "Potentially, his salvation." She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim of her cup. "You don't fear him, do you?" I considered the question carefully. "I fear what he could do," I answered truthfully, "but I don't fear who he is." Interesting distinction. Lady Sophia set down her cup. "Well, Eleanor Blackwell, I believe we'll be seeing much more of each other. The king requests your presence in the royal gardens in 1 hour. I'll have a maid help you prepare." The maid turned out to be a petite werewolf girl who introduced herself as Lydia. Her movements were quick and precise as she helped me change into a simpler but more elegant gown of pale green. "From the Queen Mother's own seamstress," she explained. "Is he kind?" I asked, as she arranged my hair into a softer style. "The king, I mean." Lydia's hands paused momentarily. "He's fair," she said carefully. "Before the attack, he often laughed. Now—" She resumed her work. "He protects what's his. That's what matters in a king." It wasn't quite the reassurance I'd hoped for, but something in her loyal defense touched me. When she finished, the mirror reflected a version of myself I barely recognized, still not beautiful like Elise, but somehow more present, less faded. The royal gardens sprawled over several acres, a series of interconnected spaces ranging from formal parterres to wilder woodland areas. I was led to a secluded corner where stone pathways wound between flowering shrubs and ancient trees, eventually opening into a small clearing centered around a fountain. Alaric waited there, his wheelchair positioned beside a stone bench. He wasn't looking toward the path, but out at the water, his profile sharp against the backdrop of cascading droplets catching sunlight. Something in his solitary stillness made my heart ache. He sensed my presence before I made a sound, his head turning with predatory quickness. "Lady Eleanor," he greeted, his voice neutral but his eyes watchful. "You came. You summoned me," I reminded him, approaching slowly. It would have been rude to refuse. A hint of amusement flickered across his features. Indeed. Please, sit. He gestured to the bench beside him. I settled on the cool stone, smoothing my borrowed gown. Up close, I could see the fine lines of strain around his eyes, the tension he carried in his broad shoulders. Had he slept at all? Or had he, like me, spent the night weighing possibilities? You've met my mother, he stated. Yes, she's direct. A short laugh escaped him. A diplomatic assessment. His fingers drummed once on the arm of his chair. She says you might do. High praise, I murmured, surprised by my own daring. His eyes narrowed slightly, but I caught the ghost of a smile. From her? The highest? He studied me for a long moment. You know why you're here? It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. You're considering me as your bride. Yes. No pretense, no gentle preamble, just the stark truth, laid between us like a gauntlet. The council requires that I take a human wife to maintain the alliance. I require that whoever I take not simper or cower or lie to my face. And you think I meet these requirements? I think you're the only candidate who might. He leaned forward slightly. Last night you said you didn't see a monster. What do you see when you look at me, Eleanor? The question deserved honesty. I looked at him. Really looked, taking in the proud set of his shoulders, the scar that marked otherwise perfect features, the strength evident in his hands, the intelligence in his gaze. But beyond those physical details, I sensed something else. A loneliness that mirrored my own, a wounded pride, a desperate need to be seen as more than his injuries had made him. I see someone who's lost something precious, I said softly, who hides pain behind anger and distance. Someone powerful, yes, and dangerous, but not to those who are loyal. I hesitated, then added, I see someone I could respect, perhaps even care for in time. Something flared in his eyes, surprise, vulnerability, quickly masked by his customary control. Pretty words, he said, his tone dismissive though his gaze remained intense. But marriage to me won't be pretty. It will mean leaving your family, submitting to werewolf customs, being constantly watched and judged. The human wife of a werewolf king is both trophy and target. My family is not. I stopped, wondering how to explain that leaving them would be no hardship. My stepmother sees me as a burden. My father is dead. My half-sisters barely know me. I have nothing to lose. Nothing? He echoed, voice dangerously soft. What about freedom? Dreams? The chance for a love match with some soft human man who could give you a normal life? I nearly laughed at the absurdity. What freedom? To be married off to whoever would take me? What dreams could I possibly fulfill as the unwanted poor relation and love? This time I did laugh, the sound brittle even to my own ears. No one has ever looked at me and seen someone worth loving. At least with you, the arrangement would be honest. His expression changed then, something fierce and almost protective flashing across his features. He reached out suddenly, his hand capturing mine. His touch was warm, almost burning against my skin, his strength evident even in that careful grip. Is that what you want, Eleanor? Honesty? Because honestly, I will never be the man I was before. I will never walk beside you, never dance with you, never... He broke off, jaw tight with suppressed emotion. But I will never lie to you, I will never abandon you, and I will never allow anyone to make you feel unwanted again. His words struck me like physical blows, exposing needs I'd buried so deeply I'd almost forgotten they existed. To be wanted, to belong somewhere, to matter to someone. Yes, I whispered, my voice catching. That's what I want. His eyes held mine, searching for something, doubt perhaps, or deception. Finding neither, he nodded once, decision made. Then be my queen, Eleanor Blackwell. Rule beside me. Be my eyes and ears among the humans, my voice when mine grows too harsh. In return, I offer you protection, position, and my unwavering loyalty. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, the gesture startlingly gentle from such a powerful man. I cannot offer love. I'm not certain I remember how, but I can offer respect, partnership, purpose. more than anyone had ever offered me before, more than I had ever dared hope for. "I accept," I said, the words sealing my fate like a spell cast into the space between us. His hand tightened briefly around mine, then released it. "It's done then." He straightened in his chair, once again every inch the Alpha King. "The formal announcement will be made tonight. The wedding will follow in a week's time, a week. 7 days to transition from unwanted stepdaughter to werewolf queen." The reality of what I'd agreed to washed over me in a dizzying wave. "So soon?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the sudden flutter of panic in my chest. "The council has waited long enough," Alaric replied, his tone brooking no argument. "And a protracted engagement would only invite complications." I understood his meaning. More time would mean more opportunity for those who opposed the match to interfere. I was no political prize, no strategic alliance, just a human girl of unremarkable lineage who, for reasons I still couldn't fathom, had caught the Alpha King's interest. "What happens now?" I asked, practical concerns surfacing through my shock. "You'll be moved to the palace immediately," he said. "My mother will oversee your preparation for the ceremony and your introduction to court life." His expression softened fractionally. "You'll have support, Eleanor. I won't leave you to navigate this alone." The gesture of reassurance, small as it was, steadied me. "And my stepfamily? They'll be invited to the wedding, of course," he said, watching me carefully, "though their cooperation is immaterial. Once you're under my protection, they have no power over you." The thought was dizzying in its liberation. No more quiet belittling, no more being treated as an unwelcome burden, no more tiptoeing around my stepmother's moods. Freedom. Not the kind he'd spoken of earlier, perhaps, but freedom nonetheless. "There's something else you should know," Alaric continued, his voice dropping lower. "The attack that paralyzed me wasn't random. There are those, both among werewolves and humans, who oppose the alliance. By accepting my proposal, you're placing yourself in their crosshairs as well." "I understand," I said, though in truth, the danger felt abstract compared to the immediate reality of this garden, this moment, this man offering me escape from the half-life I'd been living. He studied me, then nodded once, seemingly satisfied with what he saw. "You should return to your home and collect whatever personal belongings you wish to bring. A royal escort will accompany you and return you to the palace before nightfall." It was happening so quickly. Yesterday, I had been invisible Eleanor, the unwanted stepdaughter. Today, I was to be announced as the future queen. My head spun with the transformation. As if sensing my overwhelm, Alaric reached out again, his fingers lightly touching my wrist. "One step at a time," he said, his voice gentler than I'd yet heard it. "Tonight we make the announcement. Tomorrow we begin preparations. The rest will follow." I nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. "I'm ready." His mouth curved in that not-quite smile. "We'll see." The return to my stepmother's house was surreal. Royal guards flanked me as I walked through the front door, their presence immediately throwing the household into confusion. Servants scurried about, wide-eyed and whispering. My stepmother emerged from the parlor, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and calculation. "Eleanor, what is the meaning of this?" she demanded, eyeing the guards with thinly veiled apprehension. "I've come to collect my belongings," I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I'll be residing at the palace from now on." "The palace?" She laughed, the sound brittle. "Whatever for. The Alpha King has chosen me as his bride," I said, the words still strange on my tongue. "We'll be married in a week's time." The color drained from her face. That's impossible." "You must have misunderstood." Surely he meant. "There is no misunderstanding, Lady Blackwell," interrupted one of the guards, his tone professionally detached. "By order of King Alaric, Lady Eleanor is to be escorted to the palace immediately following the collection of her personal items." My stepmother's mouth opened and closed several times before she mastered herself. "Well," she said finally, her voice honeyed with sudden affection, "this is wonderful news. I always knew you had potential, Eleanor dear. What a blessing for our family. The abrupt shift in her demeanor might have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. I simply nodded and moved past her toward the stairs, a guard at my heels. In my modest room, I gathered the few possessions I truly cared about. My mother's locket, of course, a worn copy of folk tales my father had read to me as a child, a small wooden box containing pressed flowers and river stones collected during happier times, and a few simple garments that were truly mine, not hand-me-downs from my stepsisters. As I folded a faded blue shawl my mother had knitted, Nina appeared in the doorway, her young face a mixture of awe and confusion. "Is it true?" she whispered, glancing nervously at the guard who had respectfully positioned himself outside my door. "Are you really going to marry the Alpha King?" I nodded, continuing to pack my meager belongings. "But what about Elise?" she asked. "She was supposed to be presented." "Your sister's illness was fortunate for her," I said quietly. "I don't think she would have fared well with the king." Nina bit her lip, looking unusually thoughtful for her 14 years. "Will you be happy, Eleanor? They say he's different now. Dangerous." The concern in her voice touched me. Of all my step-family, Nina had been the least unkind, too young to fully embrace her mother's disdain for the unwanted stepdaughter. "I'll be safe," I said, which wasn't quite answering her question. "And I'll have purpose." "Will you forget us?" she asked in a small voice. I paused in my packing, truly looking at her. Not just Elise's little sister or my stepmother's daughter, but Nina herself, a girl on the cusp of womanhood, uncertain of her place, seeking reassurance. "No," I said softly. "I won't forget you, Nina." I hesitated, then added, "Perhaps when you're a bit older, you might visit the palace." Her face lit up. "Really?" "Mother would never allow." She stopped, realization dawning. "But she wouldn't be able to stop you now, would she?" "You'll be the queen." "Yes," I said, the word carrying a weight of authority I was only beginning to comprehend. "I will." I finished packing quickly after that, my few possessions fitting easily into a single trunk. As I descended the stairs, my stepmother waited in the foyer, her face now arranged in an expression of maternal pride. "Eleanor, dear," she said loudly, clearly for the benefit of the guards, "we are all so proud. What an honor for our family." She embraced me stiffly, then whispered in my ear, "You will remember who helped raise you, won't you? The king will be generous with dowries for your stepsisters, I'm sure." I pulled away, meeting her calculating gaze. "I'll remember everything," I said, my meaning clear from the way her smile faltered. "Every kindness and every slight." Her face hardened momentarily before she recovered her facade. "Of course, dear. Safe travels. We'll see you at the wedding." Outside, a royal carriage waited to return me to the palace, to my new life. As we pulled away, I didn't look back at the house that had never been a home. Instead, I gazed ahead at the road winding toward the capital, toward the man who had, in the space of a day, completely altered the course of my existence. By the time I returned to the palace, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the stone walls in hues of gold and amber. I was led not to the guest chambers, but to a suite in the royal wing. Spacious rooms decorated in shades of green and silver, with windows overlooking a different section of the gardens than I'd seen earlier. "These will be your rooms until the wedding," explained Lydia, who had apparently been assigned as my personal maid. "The Queen Mother thought you might appreciate some time to settle in before tonight's announcement." I wandered through the sitting room, bedchamber, and private bathing chamber, trying to absorb the reality that these opulent spaces were now mine. The bed alone was larger than my entire room at my stepmother's house, draped in silks finer than anything I'd ever touched. "It's overwhelming," I admitted to Lydia as she unpacked my pathetic little trunk, my worn possessions looking shabby against the luxury surrounding them. "You'll adjust," she said confidently, hanging my faded dresses alongside several new gowns that had mysteriously appeared in the wardrobe. "The palace seems intimidating at first, but it becomes home quicker than you'd think." Home. The word resonated within me, a longing never satisfied, a hope I'd nearly abandoned. "Now," Lydia continued briskly, "we should begin preparing for tonight. Lady Sophia selected this gown for your presentation." She indicated a stunning creation of deep silver blue silk and delicate lace. She thought it would complement your coloring. The gown was more beautiful than anything I'd ever worn, clearly made for someone of wealth and station. Someone I had never been. As Lydia helped me dress, arranging my pale hair in an elegant style adorned with small crystal pins, I watched a stranger emerge in the mirror. A young woman who looked almost regal, almost worthy of standing beside an alpha king. A soft knock at the door heralded Lady Sophia's arrival. She entered with the fluid grace characteristic of werewolves, her keen gaze assessing me from head to toe. "Better," she pronounced, circling me slowly. "Not perfect, but we have little time. You'll need to learn to move with more confidence, Eleanor. A queen never doubts her right to occupy a space. I'm not a queen yet," I reminded her. "But tonight, all eyes will be watching to see if you could be." She adjusted one of the crystal pins in my hair. "My son has made his choice. Now you must prove to the court that his judgment was sound." The weight of expectation pressed down on me. What if I can't? What if I embarrass him? Lady Sophia's expression softened marginally. "You won't," she said with surprising certainty. "There's steel in you, girl. I saw it the moment we met. You merely need to let others see it as well." She stepped back, seemingly satisfied with my appearance. "Remember, you were chosen by the Alpha King himself. That alone grants you status no one can challenge." The reminder bolstered my courage. Whatever his reasons, Alaric had seen something in me worth claiming. I straightened my shoulders, lifting my chin as Lady Sophia had instructed earlier. "Good," she approved. "Now come. He's waiting." Alaric waited in an antechamber off the main ballroom, resplendent in formal attire of black and silver that emphasized his powerful build. When I entered, his gaze swept over me, lingering on my face rather than the fine gown. "You look," he began, then paused, searching for the right word. "Presentable," I supplied, echoing my stepmother's favorite backhanded compliment. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. I was going to say transformed, but not in the ways that matter. His eyes held mine. "You still look at me directly. Good. Don't lose that quality, no matter what happens tonight." Lady Sophia cleared her throat. "The court is assembled. It's time." Alaric nodded, then gestured for me to approach. "Stand beside me," he instructed. "When I announce our engagement, place your hand on my shoulder. It's a traditional gesture among werewolves, acceptance of the bond." I moved to his side, hyper-aware of the barely contained power emanating from him. Despite the wheelchair, he projected such authority that I felt small beside him, though I wasn't short for a human woman. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice pitched for my ears alone. "No," I wanted to say. How could anyone be ready for such a monumental change? But looking into his eyes, those icy blue eyes that somehow burned with intensity, I found myself nodding. "Yes," I said, surprised to discover it wasn't entirely a lie. "I'm ready." The doors to the grand ballroom swung open. Beyond them, hundreds of faces turned toward us, werewolves and humans alike. Nobility from both races gathered to witness the Alpha King's choice. The crowd parted as we entered, Alaric wheeling himself forward with dignified precision, me walking carefully at his side. Whispers erupted as we passed. I caught fragments. Human girl. Not even pretty. Political arrangement, and forced myself to keep my gaze forward. My expression composed as Lady Sophia had instructed. Beside me, Alaric's face was a mask of regal indifference, though I sensed tension in the set of his shoulders. We reached the dais at the far end of the ballroom, where members of the royal council stood waiting. Their expressions ranged from carefully neutral to openly skeptical as they regarded me. Among them stood a tall, powerfully built werewolf with russet hair and amber eyes that assessed me with undisguised disdain. "So this is your choice, cousin?" he asked, his voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. "This human?" "Watch your tone, Victor," Alaric replied, his voice deceptively soft but edged with warning. "You address your future queen." Victor's lip curled slightly, but he offered a stiff bow. "Of course. My apologies. My king." The subtle emphasis on the last words carried an undercurrent of challenge that made my skin prickle with unease. Alaric's expression remained impassive, but I sensed his awareness of the implied threat. The tension was broken as an elderly werewolf stepped forward, raising his hands for silence. The room immediately quieted, all eyes turning toward him. "Honored guests," he intoned, his voice surprisingly strong for one of his apparent age. "We are gathered to witness a momentous occasion. As is tradition, the Alpha King has selected a bride from among the human nobility, continuing the alliance that has brought peace to our lands for generations." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The old werewolf continued. "King Alaric presents Lady Eleanor of House Blackwell as his chosen mate. The union will be sealed 1 week hence at the full moon ceremony." This was my cue. I placed my hand on Alaric's shoulder as instructed, feeling the solid strength beneath the fine fabric of his jacket. His own hand came up to cover mine briefly, an unscripted gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through me. "I accept this union," I said clearly, the traditional response Lady Sophia had taught me earlier, "and pledge my loyalty to the Alpha King and his pack." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, before scattered applause broke out, gradually spreading until the entire ballroom echoed with it, though whether from genuine approval or mere protocol, I couldn't tell. Alaric raised his hand, and silence fell once more. "Lady Eleanor will, from this moment forward, be accorded all the respect and protection due to my chosen mate," he declared, his tone making it clear this was not merely an announcement, but a command. "Any insult to her is an insult to me. Any threat to her safety will be answered with the full force of my authority." His words carried such power that many in the crowd, werewolves included, lowered their eyes instinctively. I remained standing tall beside him, acutely aware of the statement he was making. I had been elevated not just to the position of future queen, but to someone under his personal protection. "Let the celebration begin," announced the elderly council member, breaking the tension that had followed Alaric's declaration. Music swelled from an unseen orchestra, and servants appeared with trays of wine and delicacies. The formal portion of the evening complete, the gathering shifted into a celebratory mode. Though I noted many guests continued to cast curious or speculative glances our way, Alaric turned to me, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "You did well," he said, his approval warming me more than it should have. "Now comes the difficult part, meeting your new subjects." Over the next several hours, I was introduced to a dizzying array of nobility from both races. Werewolf aristocrats evaluated me with undisguised curiosity, while human nobles regarded me with emotions ranging from envy to pity. I struggled to remember names and titles, to maintain the poise Lady Sophia had emphasized, to speak neither too much nor too little. Throughout it all, Alaric remained beside me, his steady presence anchoring me amidst the swirling social currents. When I faltered over a particularly complex werewolf naming custom, he smoothly intervened. When a haughty werewolf countess made a thinly veiled comment about my modest background, his glacial stare silenced her immediately. "You're tired," he observed during a brief lull in the introductions. It wasn't a question. "I'm managing," I replied, though in truth, exhaustion was beginning to cloud my thoughts after the emotional tumult of the day. "Enough for tonight," he decided. "You need rest." Before I could protest, he signaled to Lady Sophia, who materialized at my side with remarkable swiftness. "Take her to her chambers," Alaric instructed his mother. "The court has seen enough for one evening." Lady Sophia nodded, then offered me her arm, a gesture of support disguised as protocol. "Come, my dear. Tomorrow will bring new challenges." As I turned to follow her, Alaric caught my wrist, his touch sending that now familiar warmth cascading through me. "Eleanor," he said, his voice pitched for my ears alone, "you honored our agreement tonight. I won't forget it." The simple acknowledgement steadied me more than any elaborate praise could have. I nodded once, a silent confirmation of our understanding, before allowing Lady Sophia to lead me from the ballroom. In the relative quiet of the corridor, she glanced at me appraisingly. "You surpassed expectations," she said, her tone suggesting this was no small accomplishment. "The court will talk, of course, they always do, but you've given them less ammunition than they hoped for." "Victor seemed displeased," I ventured, remembering the hostile amber eyes. Lady Sophia's expression hardened. My nephew has always coveted what belongs to Alaric. He believes that with my son's condition, the throne should pass to him. Her voice lowered. Be careful around him, Eleanor. Victor is dangerous in ways even Alaric may underestimate. The warning sent a chill through me, but exhaustion prevented me from fully processing its implications. By the time we reached my chambers, I could barely keep my eyes open. Lydia helped me out of the elaborate gown and into a soft nightdress, then drew the heavy curtains against the moonlight. Rest well, my lady, she said, a new deference in her tone. Tomorrow the real preparation begins. Alone at last, I sank onto the enormous bed, too tired even to marvel at its luxury. As sleep claimed me, my last conscious thought was of Alaric's face, not the mask of the Alpha King he showed to his court, but the glimpses of the man beneath, watchful, wounded, and far more complex than the monster of rumor. Block 4. Morning came with startling abruptness, as Lydia threw open the heavy curtains, flooding the chamber with golden light. Time to rise, my lady, she announced cheerfully. Lady Sophia has arranged for tutors to begin your instruction immediately after breakfast. I blinked groggily, the events of the previous day rushing back like a tide. The engagement, the announcement, the court scrutiny. Tutors? You have much to learn before the wedding, Lydia explained, laying out a simple but elegant day dress of pale blue. Werewolf customs, court protocol, the lineage of noble houses. Lady Sophia was quite specific about the curriculum. 6 days. 6 days to transform from Eleanor the unwanted stepdaughter to Eleanor the werewolf queen. The enormity of the task made my head spin. Will I see the king today? I asked, surprised by how much the answer mattered to me. Lydia's expression softened. He holds court this morning, but has requested your presence for a private lunch. She helped me into the dress, her nimble fingers making quick work of the small buttons. There's talk among the servants, you know. What kind of talk? I asked, tensing. Good talk, she assured me. The king has been different since your arrival, more engaged. Before you came, he would sometimes go days without leaving his private chambers, seeing only his most trusted advisors. But yesterday, he spent hours in the gardens after your meeting, and this morning he was already in his study at dawn. She smiled shyly. They say you've awakened something in him. Her words stirred a strange mix of emotions in me, pleasure at the thought I might have reached something in Alaric, anxiety at the responsibility such influence implied. Before I could respond, a brisk knock announced Lady Sophia's arrival. Good, you're awake, she said, sweeping into the room with her characteristic grace. We have much to accomplish today. She assessed my appearance with a critical eye, making minor adjustments to my hair and posture. Better than yesterday, but still too hesitant. A queen doesn't request space, she commands it. I've had little practice commanding anything, I reminded her. A hint of amusement flickered across her features. Then consider today your first lesson. The morning passed in a blur of instruction. I was shuttled between tutors who drilled me on everything from the correct forms of address for various ranks of werewolf nobility to the complex history of the alliance between our races. My head throbbed with the effort of absorbing so much information so quickly. The treaty was signed 247 years ago, following the Blood Moon War, intoned a scholarly werewolf with spectacles perched on his narrow nose. The key provision required an intermarriage between the royal werewolf line and a human noble family in each generation, symbolizing the bond between our peoples. What happens if the provision isn't fulfilled? I asked. The scholar hesitated, exchanging a glance with Lady Sophia, who had been observing my lessons. The treaty becomes void, she answered when he didn't. The protections it guarantees, for both sides, would dissolve. Understanding dawned. That's why the council was so insistent that Alaric take a bride. It's not just about an heir. It's about maintaining the peace, precisely, Lady Sophia confirmed. After the attack that left him paralyzed, many feared he would refuse to fulfill his duty, that he would let bitterness poison not just his life but the alliance itself. The weight of responsibility settled more heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't just about my future, or even Alaric's. It was about the stability of two entire peoples, By midday, my mind was saturated with new information, and I welcomed the break when Lydia came to escort me to my lunch with the king. She led me through corridors I hadn't seen before, eventually arriving at a sunny chamber with large windows overlooking a different section of the gardens. Alaric was already there, examining documents spread across a table. He looked up as I entered, his expression warming fractionally from its usual stern mask. "Eleanor," he greeted, setting aside his work. "I hope my mother hasn't exhausted you already." "Not quite," I replied, taking the seat a servant held out for me, though I never realized how little I knew about werewolf customs. "Most humans don't," he said, watching as servants placed dishes on the table before discreetly withdrawing. "It's safer that way, for them." I tilted my head questioningly, and he continued, "Knowledge brings responsibility. The more you understand about werewolves, the more accountable you become for navigating our rules correctly. Then I should learn as much as possible," I said, helping myself to a small portion of the fragrant food, especially if I'm to be queen. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "You're not afraid of the challenge." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm terrified," I admitted frankly. "But fear has never been a useful excuse for inaction." He laughed then, a short, surprise sound that transformed his face, making him appear younger, almost boyish. "You continue to surprise me, Eleanor Blackwell. Is that a good thing?" "It's refreshing." He gestured toward my plate. "Eat. We have matters to discuss." As we ate, he outlined what the coming days would entail. More lessons, fittings for my wedding attire, introductions to key members of the court, and preparations for the ceremony itself. "The wedding is a political necessity," he explained, his tone matter-of-fact, "but what follows is of greater significance." "The bonding," I said, recalling my morning lessons. "The werewolf ritual that connects mates." He nodded, his expression turning grave. "It's normally a simple process, an exchange of blood, a mingling of energies. But between a werewolf and a human," he hesitated, "it's more complex, more dangerous." "Dangerous how?" I asked, setting down my fork. "Human bodies aren't designed to withstand the power of the bond," he said carefully. "There have been incidents, deaths." The food turned to ash in my mouth. "You didn't mention this risk before." "Would it have changed your decision?" he countered, eyes intent on mine. I considered the question honestly. Would knowledge of this risk have sent me fleeing back to my stepmother's house? To a life of quiet degradation and eventual obscurity? Or worse, to a loveless marriage with whatever man would accept damaged goods? "No," I said finally. It wouldn't have changed my answer. Something that might have been relief crossed his features. "The royal physicians have been working on adaptations to the ritual, ways to minimize the danger. But I wanted you to understand that this isn't merely political theater. It's a genuine merging of lives." The implications hung between us. This wasn't just a convenient arrangement, but something permanent, irrevocable, a true binding of my life to his. "If the bond takes," I asked, voicing the question that had been forming in my mind, "will I change, become more like a werewolf?" "Not physically," he assured me. "You won't shift forms or suddenly develop enhanced strength. But you may experience echoes, sharper senses, deeper intuition, a connection to me that transcends ordinary understanding." The possibility should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, I felt a strange anticipation, as if some part of me recognized and welcomed this potential transformation. "There's something else you should know," Alaric continued, his gaze dropping briefly to his wheels before returning to my face. "My injuries. They affect more than my ability to walk. The bond requires both physical and spiritual connection. In my condition, understanding dawned. You're concerned the bond won't form completely. It's a possibility we must consider," he acknowledged, his voice tightly controlled. "If that happens, the council could potentially challenge the validity of our union, and Victor would be next in line," I guessed, remembering Lady Sophia's warning. Alaric's expression hardened. "Yes, My cousin has never hidden his ambition. With me, diminished, as he sees it, his claim grows stronger. What happens if the bond fails? I asked quietly. We proceed as planned, he said firmly. I remain king. You remain queen. We find other ways to secure the succession. His hand tightened on the arm of his wheelchair. I will not allow my injuries to become a weapon Victor can use against our rule. Our rule. The words resonated within me, acknowledging a partnership I hadn't fully grasped until that moment. This wasn't simply about me becoming Alaric's queen. It was about us ruling together, facing threats together. Then we'll make it work, I said, reaching across the table to touch his hand, a bold gesture I wouldn't have dared the day before. Bond or no bond, his fingers turned, capturing mine in a warm grip that sent that now familiar heat cascading through me. You have courage, Eleanor, he said softly. More than you realize. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I wasn't ready to name. Then he released my hand, resuming his more formal demeanor. There's one more matter to address, he said. Your step-family. I stiffened slightly. What about them? They've requested a private audience, ostensibly to congratulate you on your engagement, and actually, I asked, already knowing the answer. To secure advantages from their new connection to the crown, he said, confirming my suspicion. I've granted the audience for this afternoon. You don't have to attend if you don't wish to. The offer of protection was tempting. Part of me, the wounded, habitually overlooked part, wanted to hide behind Alaric's authority, to let him shield me from my stepmother's manipulations. But another part, the part that had looked directly into an Alpha King's eyes when all others looked away, rejected the easy escape. I'll be there, I decided. They were part of my past. I should face them as part of my future. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. As you wish. I'll have Lydia escort you to the small audience chamber when they arrive. True to his word, Lydia appeared at my chambers after my afternoon lessons, informing me that my step-family awaited in the royal reception room. She helped me change into a more formal gown of deep green to project confidence, she advised, and arranged my hair in a style that emphasized the clean lines of my face. Remember, she said, as we walked toward the audience chamber, you outrank them now. You don't need to defer to your stepmother anymore. The reminder straightened my spine and lifted my chin as I entered the reception room. My stepmother and both my stepsisters waited there. Elise apparently recovered enough from her illness to make the journey. Their expressions as I entered were a study in conflicting emotions. My stepmother's calculated obsequiousness, Elise's barely concealed resentment, and Nina's genuine, if confused, happiness. Eleanor, darling, my stepmother gushed, rushing forward as if to embrace me, before stopping at a respectful distance, uncertain of the new protocols. You look absolutely transformed. Royal life clearly agrees with you. Thank you for coming, I said, my voice cooler than I'd intended. I trust your journey was comfortable. Oh yes, quite. The royal carriage was most luxurious. She gestured to my stepsisters. Elise has finally recovered from her unfortunate illness, and Nina has been beside herself with excitement to see you. Elise curtsied stiffly, her beautiful features arranged in a polite mask that didn't reach her eyes. Congratulations on your engagement, Eleanor, she said, each word precisely enunciated. What an unexpected honor for our family. The emphasis on unexpected carried all her disbelief and resentment. How could plain, awkward Eleanor have secured the match intended for her? The question hung unspoken between us. Nina, less practiced in social duplicity, simply rushed forward to hug me. I can't believe it, she exclaimed. You're going to be queen. I returned her embrace, finding comfort in her unfeigned enthusiasm. It's been quite a surprise for me too, I admitted, smiling genuinely for the first time since entering. We've been making preparations for the wedding, of course, my stepmother interjected, clearly eager to establish her family's importance in the proceedings. Elise has been helping me select appropriate attire for such a prestigious occasion. The palace has arranged everything, I said, watching her face fall slightly at the implication that her involvement was unnecessary. But I'm pleased you'll attend." Of course, she hurried on. And afterward, well, we were hoping to discuss certain matters. The connection between our families now presents opportunities that the door opened behind me, cutting off her transparent maneuvering. Alaric entered, his wheelchair making a soft sound against the polished floor. The effect on my step-family was immediate and dramatic. My stepmother paled, Elise's eyes widened in alarm, and even Nina stepped back instinctively. "Your Majesty," my stepmother stammered, dropping into a deep curtsy that her daughters hastily mimicked. What an unexpected honor. Alaric positioned himself beside me, his presence a solid warmth at my side. "I wanted to personally welcome my future in-laws," he said, his tone deceptively mild. "Eleanor has spoken of you." The slight emphasis on spoken sent a visible tremor through my stepmother. What had I told him? What might I yet reveal? The questions were clear in her suddenly anxious expression. "You've raised an exceptional young woman," Alaric continued, his hand coming to rest lightly on my arm, a gesture of possession and protection that didn't escape anyone's notice. "We did our best," my stepmother managed weakly. "Eleanor has always been unique." "Indeed." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And now she will be queen." "Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it, Lady Blackwell?" My stepmother swallowed hard. "Indeed, Your Majesty. I understand you wish to discuss opportunities," he continued smoothly. "Perhaps you could elaborate." Trapped, my stepmother floundered for a diplomatic approach. "Merely family matters, Elise's coming debut, Nina's education. Nothing that need concern Your Majesty." "Everything concerning Eleanor's family concerns me now," he countered, his grip on my arm tightening fractionally. "But I'm sure the royal treasurer can address any financial considerations. As for the young lady's futures," he glanced at my stepsisters, his gaze lingering thoughtfully on Nina. "The palace is always in need of suitable companions for the queen. Perhaps when she's older, the younger Miss Blackwell might be considered for such a position, if Eleanor approves, of course." Nina's face lit up at the prospect, while my stepmother calculated the advantage of having a daughter placed so close to power. "How generous, Your Majesty. Eleanor inspires generosity," he replied, his eyes meeting mine briefly, something almost tender in their depths. Then his expression hardened as he turned back to my stepmother. "She also inspires loyalty. I trust her family will demonstrate that quality unfailingly in the future." The warning couldn't have been clearer. My stepmother bobbed another curtsy. "Of course, Your Majesty. Our devotion to Eleanor has always been—" "Let's not strain credibility, Lady Blackwell," Alaric interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "The past is written. What matters now is how you conduct yourself going forward." A heavy silence fell, broken only when I placed my hand gently on Alaric's arm. "Perhaps we should allow my family to refresh themselves before dinner," I suggested, offering a graceful exit from the increasingly tense exchange. "They've had a long journey." Alaric studied me for a moment, then inclined his head in acquiescence. "As you wish." He turned back to my stepfamily. "Servants will show you to your accommodations. You'll dine with the court tonight." After they had been escorted out, Alaric remained beside me, watching my face carefully. "Are you all right?" The genuine concern in his voice touched me deeply. "Yes," I said, surprised to find it true. Seeing them now, after everything that's happened, they seem smaller somehow, less intimidating. "Power has that effect," he observed. "It changes how you see others, and how they see you." "Is that why you came?" I asked. "To show them your power?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I came to show them your power, Eleanor. To make it clear that any disrespect toward you would have consequences. You were protecting me," I said, a warm feeling unfurling in my chest. "Yes," he acknowledged simply. "And I always will." The promise lingered between us as he took his leave, his hand brushing mine briefly, a touch that seemed increasingly deliberate, increasingly meaningful. I watched him go, aware of a shifting within me, a realignment of how I viewed not just my step-family but myself. Eleanor, the unwanted stepdaughter, was fading. In her place was emerging someone newer, stronger. Someone who might, in time, be worthy of the title queen. The days that followed passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Each morning brought new lessons in werewolf customs and court protocol. Each afternoon, fittings for my wedding attire or introductions to important nobles. Each evening, formal dinners where I was displayed beside Alaric like a new and curious acquisition. Throughout it all, I found myself increasingly drawn to the man behind the Alpha King's formidable facade. In quiet moments, a private lunch in the gardens, a brief conversation in the library, glimpses of Alaric himself emerged, his dry wit, his surprising knowledge of human literature, his passionate commitment to his people's welfare. I learned that before his injury, he had been an avid explorer of the wild territories beyond the kingdom's borders, that he still woke before dawn each day to train his upper body, refusing to surrender completely to his limitations, that his favorite color was not the royal black and silver, but the deep green of the ancient forests. Small details, perhaps, but each one added dimension to the man I was pledged to marry, transforming him from a strategic alliance into a person I found myself genuinely curious about, perhaps even beginning to care for. On the eve of our wedding, I stood on the balcony of my chambers, watching the full moon rise silver bright above the palace gardens. Tomorrow, I would become a queen. Tomorrow, I would bind my life to Alaric's in ways I still couldn't fully comprehend. A soft knock at my door broke my reverie. Expecting Lydia with some last-minute instructions, I called permission to enter. Instead, Alaric himself wheeled into my chambers, his presence unexpected and strangely intimate in these private rooms. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, pausing just inside the door. "No," I assured him, moving from the balcony to meet him. "Is something wrong?" "No." He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. "I wanted to give you something, before tomorrow makes everything official." From inside his jacket, he withdrew a small box of dark wood, intricately carved with symbols I recognized from my lessons, ancient werewolf runes representing protection and loyalty. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained, holding it out to me. "A human, like you, who married an Alpha King in a time of even greater tension between our peoples. She wore it on the day of her bonding." I accepted the box with trembling hands, opening it carefully to reveal a delicate silver bracelet set with moonstones that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "It's beautiful," I whispered, touching the cool stones reverently. "The stones are said to ease the transition during bonding," he said, watching my face closely. "To help the human partner withstand the surge of power." He paused, then added quietly, "I want you to have every protection possible." The gesture moved me deeply, not just the valuable gift itself, but the thought behind it, the concern for my well-being it represented. "Thank you," I said, looking up to find his eyes intent on mine. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the bracelet. I nodded, extending my wrist. His fingers were warm against my skin as he fastened the delicate clasp, the touch lingering longer than strictly necessary. The moonstones seemed to pulse once against my pulse point, as if recognizing something in my blood, before settling into a subtle glow. "It suits you," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent a shiver through me. "As if it was waiting for you." Our eyes met, and something shifted in the space between us. A recognition, a possibility, a future not merely endured, but perhaps embraced. His hand still held mine, his thumb tracing small circles on my wrist that sent tingles up my arm. "Alaric," I began, not sure what I meant to say, but needing to give voice to the emotions swirling within me. "Tomorrow," he said softly, releasing my hand with what seemed like reluctance. "After tomorrow, there will be time for everything else." He backed his chair away slightly, creating distance between us. "Sleep well, Eleanor. Dream of better days to come." With those words, he left as unexpectedly as he had arrived, leaving me standing in the center of my chambers, the moonstone bracelet cool against my skin, my heart beating a new, uncertain rhythm that felt dangerously like hope. Morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through windows that servants had already thrown open. Today was my wedding day. The thought settled strangely in my mind, both surreal and undeniable. Lydia arrived with a team of attendants, their arms laden with everything needed to transform me into a royal bride. "The Queen Mother sent these," she explained, gesturing to two older werewolf women who carried an ornate silver box. Traditional adornments for an alpha mate. The preparations were elaborate. First, a bath scented with herbs I didn't recognize. "To purify the body," one attendant explained. Then a meticulous grooming of my pale hair, each strand arranged in an intricate pattern, interwoven with delicate silver chains and tiny crystal beads that caught the light with every movement. "The dress was specially designed," Lydia said, reverently removing a gown from a cedar chest. "Silver for the moon, blue for human nobility, and white for new beginnings." It was the most beautiful garment I had ever seen. Layers of flowing fabric that seemed to shimmer between colors with each movement, detailed with subtle embroidery depicting the history of the alliance between werewolves and humans. When they helped me into it, the fabric settled against my skin like cool water, surprisingly light despite its elaborate appearance. Lady Sophia arrived as the final preparations were being completed. She dismissed the other attendants with a gesture, then circled me slowly, evaluating the transformation with her keen gaze. "You look like a queen," she said finally, genuine approval in her voice. "Alaric will be pleased." The mention of his name sent a flutter through my stomach. Nervousness, anticipation, and something deeper I wasn't quite ready to examine. "How is he this morning?" A shadow of concern crossed her features. "Determined. The ceremony will not be easy for him. His pride—" She trailed off, then straightened her shoulders. "But he has endured worse, and your presence seems to strengthen him." Her words warmed me even as they underscored the challenges that lay ahead. This day was about politics and alliance, yes, but also about two people, one broken in body, one broken in spirit, finding unexpected connection. "I have something for you," Lady Sophia said, producing a small silver dagger with a hilt of polished moonstone that matched my bracelet. "This will be used in the bonding ritual." She held it out, handle first. "You should carry it until then." I accepted the weapon, surprised by its weight. I've never carried a blade before. "There are many things you'll do as queen that you've never done before," she replied pragmatically. "The key is to do them with confidence." She helped me secure the dagger in a concealed sheath within the folds of my gown. "Remember, when the time comes, a single drop of blood is all that's required. The magic does the rest. The magic." Despite days of lessons about werewolf customs, the supernatural elements of what lay ahead remained mysterious to me. How would it feel to be bonded to another being? Would I sense Alaric's thoughts, feel his emotions, or would the bond fail to form properly, as he feared? "It's time," Lady Sophia announced, breaking my reverie. "Are you ready?" No, I wasn't ready. How could anyone be ready for such a transformation? But I nodded anyway, squaring my shoulders as I'd been taught. "Yes, I'm ready." The ceremony took place in the ancient stone circle that stood at the heart of the palace grounds, a sacred space where werewolves had conducted important rituals for generations. As I was led along a path strewn with silver leaves, I saw hundreds of guests already assembled. Werewolf nobility in formal attire, human aristocrats in their finest, all watching with unabashed curiosity as I approached. My stepmother and stepsisters stood among the human contingent, their expressions a study in conflicting emotions. My stepmother's calculating gaze darted between me and the assembled werewolf lords, no doubt assessing potential advantages. Elise's face was a mask of practiced politeness that didn't quite hide her resentment. Only Nina's smile seemed genuine, her eyes wide with wonder at the spectacle. At the center of the stone circle waited Alaric. He had eschewed his usual wheelchair for a specially designed seat of silver and black wood that resembled a throne, allowing him to maintain his dignity during the ceremony. Even seated, he commanded attention, his powerful presence drawing all eyes. His formal attire of deepest black accented with silver made his pale skin and blue eyes seem to glow in contrast. Those eyes found mine as I entered the circle, and everything else, the murmuring crowd, my step-family's scrutiny, the weight of protocol, fell away. In that moment, we were just Alaric and Eleanor, two wounded souls reaching towards something neither had expected to find. The elderly werewolf I recognized from the engagement announcement stepped forward to conduct the ceremony, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed gathering. The words were both familiar and strange, elements of traditional human marriage vows interwoven with older, wilder promises from werewolf custom. Do you, Alaric Grey, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, accept this human woman as your mate, your queen, and your partner in rule? Do you pledge to protect her, to respect her counsel, and to bind your life force to hers in the ancient way? I do, Alaric replied, his voice strong and clear, his eyes never leaving mine. And do you, Eleanor Blackwell, accept this alpha werewolf as your mate, your king, and your partner in life? Do you pledge to stand beside him, to strengthen his rule, and to accept the bond that will join your spirits? I do, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The elder nodded in solemn approval, then raised his hands. Then let the binding begin. Lady Sophia stepped forward, bringing a chalice of hammered silver. The mixing of blood, she announced. The oldest magic known to our kind. This was the moment I had been prepared for. I reached for the concealed dagger, drawing it from its sheath with hands that trembled only slightly. Alaric extended his hand, palm up, a silent invitation. Following the protocol I'd been taught, I pressed the tip of the blade to my palm first, allowing a single drop of blood to fall into the chalice. Then, with utmost care, I did the same to Alaric's outstretched palm, our blood mingling in the silver vessel. The elder took the chalice, intoning words in the ancient language of werewolves, sounds more like growls and howls than human speech. Then he raised it toward the sun, which had reached its zenith directly overhead. Drink, he instructed, offering the chalice first to Alaric, then to me. The liquid burned like fire as it passed my lips, not painful, exactly, but intensely, alarmingly alive. Heat spread from my throat through my limbs, gathering strangely around my heart. I gasped, swaying slightly as the sensation intensified. Steady, Alaric murmured, reaching for my hand. His touch anchored me as the burning grew, became a pulse, a rhythm that seemed to echo between us. The elder began another incantation, this one accompanied by movements of his gnarled hands, tracing patterns in the air between Alaric and me. With each gesture, the connection between us seemed to strengthen, the pulse synchronizing until I couldn't tell if it was his heartbeat I felt or my own. Then, suddenly, resistance, like hitting a wall in what should have been an open doorway. The pulse faltered, stuttered. Alaric's grip on my hand tightened painfully, his face contorting with effort or pain. I couldn't tell which. The elder's chanting grew more urgent, his gestures more emphatic. The bond resists, Lady Sophia murmured from somewhere beside me, concern evident in her voice. His injury. Panic flared within me. If the bonding failed, everything we'd worked toward would be compromised. The alliance, Alaric's rule, our future. Instinctively, I reached for the moonstone bracelet on my wrist, drawing strength from its cool weight against my skin. As my fingers touched the stones, they flared with sudden brilliance, illuminating the space between Alaric and me with silvery light. The barrier I'd sensed seemed to waver, to thin. Eleanor. Alaric's voice reached me, strained but determined. Look at me. I met his gaze, finding his eyes had changed, the blue now ringed with silver, pupils dilated with the effort of the partial transformation his human form allowed. In them, I saw pain. Yes, but also fierce determination and something else. Something that looked startlingly like tenderness. Let me in, he whispered. The words meant for me alone, despite the crowd surrounding us. Trust me. And I did. I had no idea how to manipulate the strange energy flowing between us, but I stopped fighting it, stopped fearing it. Instead, I imagined opening myself to it, to him, not just my mind but the core of who I was. With all my doubts and hopes and newly awakening feelings, the barrier shattered. Power surged through the connection, no longer blocked but flowing freely between us. Alaric's presence flooded into me, not thoughts exactly, but emotions, sensations, the essence of him. Strength and pain, loneliness and pride, and beneath it all, an unexpected tenderness that took my breath away. The elder's voice rose to a triumphant crescendo. The bond is formed, alpha and mate, joined in body and spirit. A roar went up from the werewolf contingent, a primal sound of approval that vibrated through the stone circle. The human guests applauded more decorously, though many looked faintly disturbed by the display of supernatural power they had just witnessed. Through it all, Alaric's hand remained clasped in mine, our newly formed bond humming between us like a plucked string. I could feel his satisfaction, his relief, and beneath it, an ache of vulnerability that he would never have revealed willingly. "You feel it." His voice sounded in my mind, surprise and wonder coloring the thought. "Yes," I replied, not speaking aloud, but somehow knowing he would hear me. "I feel you." The ceremony concluded with more traditional elements, exchanges of rings, pronouncements of our union, formal acknowledgments of my new status as queen, but these seemed almost perfunctory after the intensity of the bonding. When Alaric finally pulled me toward him for the ritual kiss that sealed our marriage, the touch of his lips against mine sent a cascade of sensations through our newly formed connection, heat and hunger and promise that left me dizzy. "My queen," he murmured against my lips, the words carrying a depth of meaning beyond the formal title. The celebration that followed was a blur of congratulations, formal dances, which Alaric observed from his throne-like chair, his eyes never leaving me, and elaborate feasting that stretched well into evening. Throughout it all, I remained acutely aware of Alaric's presence, not just physically, but through our bond. A warm, steady connection that allowed me to sense his location, his general emotional state, even when we were separated by the crowded ballroom. It was only late in the evening, as the festivities continued without us, that we were finally escorted to the royal chambers, rooms I had never seen before, connected to Alaric's private suite by an adjoining door. "These are your formal quarters," Lady Sophia explained as servants bustled about, arranging my few possessions among the luxurious furnishings. "You may, of course, share the king's chambers as well, but tradition dictates that the queen maintain her own space." The implication was clear. While our marriage needed to be consummated to fully validate our union, werewolf custom acknowledged the complexity of such relationships, especially between different species. I would have privacy when I needed it. When the servants had finally withdrawn, leaving me alone in the opulent suite, I stood uncertain in the center of the room. The bond told me that Alaric waited nearby, his emotions a complex tangle I couldn't yet fully interpret. Custom dictated I should go to him, but suddenly all my newfound courage faltered. What did I know of being a wife, let alone to a werewolf king? What if my inexperience disappointed him? What if the limitations of his injury made intimacy a source of frustration, rather than connection? A soft knock at the adjoining door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Eleanor?" Alaric's voice came through the wood. "May I enter?" "Yes," I called, smoothing my wedding gown with nervous hands. The door opened to reveal Alaric, still in his formal attire, though he had shed the ceremonial outer robe. He had returned to his usual wheelchair, which he maneuvered into my chambers with practiced ease. "You're anxious," he observed, and I realized he could sense my emotions just as I could his. "The bond will take some getting used to." "It's not that," I said, honesty seeming the only viable path. "It's what comes next." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He wheeled closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "Eleanor, nothing needs to happen tonight that you're not comfortable with. The bonding itself has secured our union in the eyes of werewolf law. The rest..." He hesitated. "The rest can wait until you're ready." His consideration touched me deeply, especially as I could sense through our new connection that his own desires ran counter to the restraint he offered. "And if I am ready?" I asked softly. Despite my inexperience, his eyes darkened, pupils dilating slightly in a way I was beginning to recognize as a sign of his wolf stirring closer to the surface. "Then we would proceed carefully," he said, his voice dropping to a lower register that sent shivers along my spine. "With patience and consideration for both our unique circumstances." I took a step toward him, then another, closing the distance between us. "Show me," I whispered. What followed was a discovery of each other, of the possibilities our new bond created, of connections that transcended physical limitations. Through our link, Alaric could feel sensations beyond what his injured body allowed, while I experienced echoes of his wolf's heightened awareness. When we finally came together completely, the bond flared between us, multiplying every touch, every sensation, until it was impossible to tell where one of us ended and the other began. Afterward, lying beside him in the massive bed in his chambers, I traced the scars that mapped his torso, evidence of both the assassination attempt and earlier battles. "Can you feel this?" I asked, fingers skimming along his side where sensation began to fade. "Yes and no," he replied, watching me with hooded eyes. "Not physically, but through you, through the bond. It's remarkable." His hand caught mine, bringing it to his lips. "You're remarkable." I smiled, still marveling at how comfortable I felt with him. How natural this intimacy had become in such a short time. So this is what being married to a werewolf is like. A low laugh rumbled through his chest. "This is what being married to me is like," he corrected. "And I suspect it will continue to surprise us both." We lay in companionable silence for a time, the bond between us a gentle hum of contentment. Then Alaric spoke again, his tone shifting to something more serious. "There's something you should know now that we're truly bonded." I propped myself up on one elbow to see his face better. "What is it?" "The assassination attempt," he began, his expression darkening with memory. "It wasn't random. I've had my suspicions for some time, but I needed to be certain before acting." His hand tightened around mine. "It was Victor, Eleanor. My own cousin orchestrated the attack." The revelation sent a chill through me. "You're certain?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I've been gathering evidence quietly." He believed that with me, crippled and unable to produce an heir, the council would eventually set me aside in his favor. A grim smile touched his lips. "He didn't anticipate you. What will you do?" I asked, fear and determination mingling within me at the thought of the danger lurking so close. "Now that our bond is secured, I'll move against him," Alaric said, his voice taking on the edge of the Alpha King. "With you at my side, his primary argument against my rule is invalidated. The council will support us. He'll fight back," I warned, remembering the cold calculation in Victor's amber eyes. "Yes," Alaric agreed, "which is why I need you to be careful. Very careful. Until he's dealt with, you're in danger." I thought of my mother's locket, of her final words to me. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in choosing your own chains. I had chosen this path, this man, this life. I would not shrink from its challenges now. "We're in danger," I corrected, laying my hand against his cheek. "And we'll face it together." He turned his face to press a kiss into my palm, his eyes gleaming with fierce approval. "Together," he agreed, pulling me closer. "My queen, my mate, my Eleanor." As I settled against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my cheek, I marveled at the journey that had brought me here. 1 week ago, I had been the unwanted stepdaughter, invisible and insignificant. Now I was a queen, bonded to a man whose strength and vulnerability called to something deep within me, standing at the beginning of a life I could never have imagined. There would be challenges ahead, Victor's treachery to confront, a court to navigate, an alliance to maintain. But for the first time in my life, I didn't face the future alone. Through our bond, I could feel Alaric's unwavering presence, his determination, and something newer, more tender, growing between us. Not quite love yet, perhaps, but its promising beginning. Outside our windows, the full moon bathed the royal gardens in silver light, the same light that seemed to pulse gently in the moonstone bracelet still circling my wrist, a symbol of protection, Lady Sophia had called it. But it had become more than that, a bridge between worlds, between wolf and human, between past and future. I closed my eyes, not to sleep but to savor this moment of peace before the battles to come. "Alaric," I whispered. "Hmm?" His fingers stroked gently through my hair. "Thank you for seeing me," I said softly, when no one else did. His arms tightened around me. "I will always see you, Eleanor," he promised, the words resonating through our bond with absolute truth, always. And in that promise lay everything I had ever wanted but never dared hope for: recognition, belonging, purpose, home. Not in a place, but in a person. In the paralyzed alpha king who had, against all odds, become my mate, my partner, my future. The unwanted stepdaughter had found her place at last.